All right, we are halfway through SEC Media Days. Of course, Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs went yesterday. Kirby Smart had a lot to talk about, a number of different topics. Talked about complacency, talked about retention of the staff, NIL, speeding, what they're trying to do to win, back-to-back national championships. If you want to read every word, we have it over on Dawg Post. We've got inside scoop. We've got quotes from everyone, our breakdowns of what we think they said, what they tried to say. We explain it all over on Dawg Post. We got stories left and right. Make sure you are subscribed to the newsletter so you don't miss any of the content we've been pushing out. And, in this video, I just kind of want to give my thoughts on what Kirby Smart said because, again, he was up at the podium for 30 plus minutes, started off talking about Cedric Van Pran, his starting center, one of the leaders on the team, a guy who spoke to the team, in early July, talking about, the speeding and the reckless driving. And he said, guys, we're not on the path to winning 3 straight championships if we're going to let all of this stuff dictate how we're starting the season. And he said, we make mistakes, we own them, but we have to move on. And, we're representing the University of Georgia and we can't continue to let this happen. So he has already stepped up as a leader. He's the best center in college football. He's the leader of this offense. Brock Bowers was there. Arguably the greatest, player in college football right now. We've said that a lot. And Kirby had a lot of great things, multiple stories about Brock Bowers and just his work ethic and his drive, his competitiveness and why he is the player that he is. Again, you can read all about that on Dawg Post. He talked about Kamari Lasser, defensive back, who played at Tuscaloosa, his why, right? What his mother was able, did to make sure that he was in the best high school and in a position to play at a place like Georgia. So he goes through a lot of different details on those 3 guys. But what I want to talk about is what he said about complacency. He knows that that's the biggest thing that might keep them from winning back-to-back titles. And he's got a great quote right here. Before he went even asked him about, being complacent, how do you keep your team driven, motivated, hungry for a third? Excuse me, he said this. He goes, the threat for us is complacency. The first thing you have to acknowledge is that it's a threat. Like if you acknowledge that complacency is a threat, it's the first step towards stomping it out. So we look for 2 things when we look for people to join our organization. I'm not talking about just the players. I'm talking about anyone in our organization. Do they love football? And do they embrace being part of something bigger than themselves? Are they selfless? He's looking for people that care not only about their job and their role, but about everyone else's. People who love the program, love the team, love the school, and love the players. So, when he says that, he's talking about not just the players that they recruit, but everyone he brings in, from the coaching staff to the administrators, anyone who plays a role in the football program. He said, we look for, do you love football and are you selfless? Those are the 2 things that he said. He said, quote, we want to find people who love football and embrace a selfless role. Those 2 qualities, loving football and embracing being selfless, are not dependent on outcomes. They're not dependent on wins and losses. Did I get a sack? Did I touch the ball? That's not what we're looking for, guys that are dependent on outcomes. We want guys that think independent of outcomes. So when you see complacency take over, it's when a team's enthusiasm and ego start worrying about the outcomes. That's not what we do at Georgia, he continued. That's not what we bring into our place. That's not what we bring into the culture that we want to be or want to have. We want selfless people who love football, and that's what we build around. And that struck me as someone who covers recruiting. And I know that, multiple 5-star running backs and wide receivers are not coming to Georgia because they don't necessarily want to share the love, right? That some guys, especially that wide receiver, they want to catch the ball. Guys want to catch 100 passes, 1,500 yards, 15 plus touchdowns so they can reel in some NIL money. Kirby talked about that also. He goes, it's not about showing off the resources and the education when you have these recruits on a visit. They all want to talk about NIL, and I know that personally. I can't really say everything that I'm being told about, this kid's recruitment or that recruitment, but almost everything is about NIL, and it's not the player asking, it's their families too. It's what it's all about. So a lot of these guys don't want to come to a place at Georgia, and Georgia's not for them. They want receivers who are talented, but have no problem being physical and blocking, for the running backs in the running game. They want running backs who want to come off the field when they're not 100%, so another guy can. When you do the little things and you bring in guys that are selfless and care about everyone else on the team and care about winning, you're going to win games. And you're not complacent when you care about everyone else. And I think that's what he's talking about. He talks a lot about connection, getting the players to know each other. And I think he said that, in the interview as well. He goes, I love this team. I love that they care about each other. And I'll tell you what, Kirby was happy. They're doing a lot of different things, strategy-wise, where he's keeping this team locked in, ready to go. And I know that they've had kind of a tumultuous offseason, a lot going on off the field that they've, been asked about and have had some heat on. But at the end of the day, these are very talented players who are not, ego driven. A lot of these guys care about each other and all they want to do is win. And when you talk about, do you love football and are you selfless? That's kind of what happens when you bring a lot of people, players, coaches, administrators together. They have one common goal, and it's to win a championship. And I think Kirby knows that he has a special team ahead of him. He knows that they're, starting to get locked in. September's still kind of a ways away, but he knows that they're ready. They're not complacent. They've done this before. They've done it twice. They know what it takes to win back-to-back titles, and he thinks or knows that this team is hungry for a third. Carson Beck, he said before, those 2 national titles weren't mine. I want to go get my own. Cedric Van Pran wants to win his third at center. Brock Bowers wants to win a third in his third season at Georgia. Their, history is up for the taking, and they can reach out and grab it. They've got the schedule to do so. They've got the talent, both on offense and defense. They check every box, and I think Kirby knows that. He was very excited. He knew that he was going to get questions about, what's going on in the offseason, but you could tell he was happy to be there, happy to bring guys like Brock Bowers and Kamari Lassiter, who loves Georgia and gives it everything he has. A hard-hitting defensive back who I think the national media got to know a little bit more. He's the guy who's still flying under the radar from a national perspective, and people got to see a lot of him. And excuse me, he was happy to have all 3 of those guys there. But again, he talks about better never rests. That is kind of the theme for this season. If you're not getting better, someone else is. And everyone is trying to hunt Georgia this season. He said before, we will not be hunted at the University of Georgia, but, Alabama's not at the top. When people are coming for the king, it's Georgia. And he, that's the motto. He said one of their big mantras is better never rest. He's talking about the New Zealand All Blacks, the most successful sports team in the history of teams. Over 100 years, they've had the highest winning percentage. He said, let's study them. What do they do? And he said, those are strong words now when you think about it. Better never rest. He said, our kids understand it. Our kids have learned it. What drives us for the season is intrinsic motivation. We're not going to be controlled by outside narratives and what people say and who's going to be the quarterback, so on and so on. The intrinsic motivation comes from within, and we decide and what we decide to do. He said this team, the 23 team, is still defining itself. We know where that goes, or we don't know where that goes, That happens over the course of the summer and in fall camp, but I like where it's at. He said, I love the buy-in. I love the fact that these guys love being around each other and they love competing and they love football. That's so important to me. He talks about keeping guys on the staff around, which is hard to do. Glenn Schumann is going to be a head coach one day. Keeping him around is key. Having a guy like Mike Bobo, who played at Georgia, is key. Having a guy like Brian McClendon on the staff is key. He said we have 26 UGA grads on our staff. Retention for us is the key to sustaining success. Again, retention is the key to sustaining success, if I can get that out. But he said it perfectly clear multiple times. Keeping your roster intact, especially the coaching staff intact, is so key. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, they had a lot of transfers come out of the program this offseason. Yeah, well, that was mutual. A lot of them, went through a year or two at Georgia and they said, I'm still not playing. I can't cut it. This is not for me. This coming to work every day before practice, after practice, doing the little things, doing the extra work. It's not for me. I'm going to leave. And in other cases, Kirby and the staff say, hey, you know what? You're working hard. We just don't have a plan for you. You're not going to play. We just brought in a sick recruiting class. We like those guys. Maybe it's, time for you to look elsewhere. So I think the only guy that they would have loved to have come back was A.D. Mitchell. I think everyone else was completely replaceable. So getting the guys that you want to stay, keeping them on board is just as big. You have to recruit these kids on your roster each and every year from not hitting that transfer portal. And I've written about that and spoken about that as well. But he did have a lot to say. And again, you can read all about it on Dawg Post. You can read our thoughts on it. But he seemed very happy to be there and to be right around the corner from fall camp. And, we've said in the past, we think this could be another special season because there's not really one team that scares you. Ohio State is going to be good. Michigan's going to be good. LSU's going to be good. Clemson, Florida State could be really good. And of course, Alabama should be really good, but they've got some question marks at quarterback. USC has a tremendous quarterback, but do they have anyone who can tackle, right? Texas should be really good, but they always should be really good with the talent they bring in. But they do less with more than anyone. That used to be Georgia. Now it's Texas and has been Texas for a while. Tennessee should be really good. Are they going to compete for a championship? Are they better than Georgia? I don't think so. At the end of the day, if you're comparing Georgia to everyone else side by side, I think Georgia's the clear number one team in the country heading into the season. I think Kirby Smart knows that. He thinks that. And, hearing him talk today, now I'm making this on Tuesday. You're watching this on Wednesday. But, hearing him talk, I think he thinks that it could be a very, very special season in 2023. What do you think? Make sure to head over to Dawg Post to read everything we've got. A lot of great content. Appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you over on the website.